The town of Las Colinas slept under the afternoon sun, its cobblestone streets and white houses with red tile roofs reflecting the warm glow of the fading summer. At number 12 Calle de los Olivos, the Mendoza family home was a hive of activity as always. Isabel Mendoza, her hair pulled into a casual yet elegant bun, watched from the kitchen window as her two 7-year-old sons played in the yard. "Alejandro, Benjamin, dinner is almost ready," she called, wiping her hands on her apron. The two boys, identical with their chestnut curls and hazel eyes, exchanged a knowing glance before running towards the house, their laughter mixing with the sound of cicadas. They were Alejandro and Benjamin, but to everyone in Las Colinas, they were simply the Mendoza twins. "Mama, can I set the table?" asked Benjamin, already carefully lifting the blue ceramic plates. "I'll help," said Alejandro, grabbing the cutlery with less delicacy but with the same intent. Isabel smiled, her heart filling as it always did at the sight of her son's dynamic. Alejandro, born 7 minutes earlier, wore that tiny advantage with comic seriousness, always ready to protect, to lead. Benjamin, his gentle shadow, observed more, felt more deeply. She still remembered the day, years ago, when a boy at the park took Benjamin's toy. Alejandro, only 4 at the time, stepped in with his little fists clenched, a fierce tiny guardian. Their father, Javier, a carpenter with calloused hands and a quiet smile, arrived home smelling of pine wood and effort. Dinner was a sacred ritual. Lentil soup, fresh fish from the market, newly baked bread. Javier asked about their day at school. "Senorita Elena said my drawing of the sea was the best in the class," Benjamin commented, a blush of pride on his cheeks. "I won the race in PE, declared Alejandro, straightening his shoulders. "Pedro Lopez tried to push me, but he's slower than a turtle." Javier laughed, a deep, warm sound. "Well done, champ. But remember, strength is for protecting, not for showing off." "I know, Papa," Alejandro nodded, though his sparkling gaze suggested winning had its charms too. After dinner, while Isabel washed the dishes and Javier reviewed some blueprints at the dining table, the twins retreated to their shared bedroom. It was a space that told the story of their lives: twin beds with messy blankets, shelves holding Alejandro's trophies, karate, athletics, alongside Benjamin's meticulous drawings, landscapes, family portraits, a faded mural on the wall they had painted together at age 5, a bright sun over mountains. "Want to play the switch?" whispered Benjamin, his eyes gleaming with mischief. The switch was their secret game, perfected over years. It involved imitating each other so perfectly they could fool even their parents for short periods. Alejandro nodded, a playful smile on his lips. They swapped sweaters. Benjamin put on Alejandro's blue one, a bit loose. Alejandro put on Benjamin's green one, a bit tight, and practiced their postures. Alejandro relaxed his shoulders, adopting Benjamin's thoughtful, soft gaze. Benjamin stiffened up, mimicking Alejandro's confident stride. They stepped out into the hallway. Isabel was folding laundry in the washroom. "Mama, can I have another cookie?" asked Alejandro, softening his voice to sound like Benjamin. Isabel looked up, smiling. "Just one, sweetheart. You always ask permission. Your brother would have already taken 3 in secret." Benjamin, actually Alejandro, smiled shyly and took a cookie. When they returned to their room, they burst into muffled laughter. "It worked," whispered Benjamin, excited. Alejandro gave him a light punch on the arm. "Of course it worked." We're invincible. The years passed. Adolescence arrived with its hormonal storms and unshakable loyalties. At the Ramon Y. Kyle High School, the twins were known but distinct. Alejandro joined the wrestling team, his body filling with defined muscle, his reputation growing as someone not to be provoked. Benjamin took refuge in the art room, his talent for capturing emotion on canvas earning praise from his teacher, Senora Ortiz. It was in their third year when the switch became more than a game. Alejandro had forgotten to study for a crucial history exam, too focused on a tournament. Benjamin, who had aced the same exam the week before, devised a plan. You take my place in the exam. I'll take yours at wrestling practice, said Benjamin, his fingers stained with charcoal. You can't wrestle, Alejandro objected. I don't need to wrestle. I just need to look like you. Coach Martinez never looks too closely during warm-ups. And you know history as well as I do, you just didn't study the dates. It was risky, but it worked. Benjamin, with his hair slicked back like Alejandro's and moving with studied clumsiness, went unnoticed in the gym. Alejandro, having devoured Benjamin's notes the night before, passed the exam. The only person who caught them was their lifelong friend Lucia, who saw Benjamin, Alejandro, nervously correcting his posture in the hallway. You two are lunatics, she told them, laughing, but she kept their secret. That complicity, that ability to be each other's refuge, became the cornerstone of their relationship. When Benjamin suffered from a girl's rejection, Alejandro would find the guy and, with a calm but firm talk, ensure he left his brother alone. When Alejandro injured his shoulder before a major championship, Benjamin spent entire nights drawing complex muscle diagrams to help him visualize the recovery. On their last night before university, sitting on their rooftop watching the stars over Las Colinas, Javier joined them. You will always have this, he said, his voice serious. This bond. The world will try to separate you, to label you. But you are more than twins. You are one soul in two bodies. Don't forget that. Alejandro put an arm around Benjamin's shoulders. Never, Papa. Benjamin nodded, feeling the weight and truth of the words. In that moment, under a sky full of stars, they couldn't imagine how far that truth would take them, nor how dark the path would have to become before the light of their brotherhood shone again. University and the city separated them physically for the first time. Alejandro chose a school with a solid sports science program, his martial discipline finding a new academic focus. Benjamin enrolled in a fine art school, his world expanding among oils, watercolors, and the smell of turpentine. Late-night phone calls and weekend visits kept the bond strong, but their worlds began to diverge. It was at a student art exhibition that Benjamin met Carla. She wasn't an art student. She was there with a friend, a law student. Benjamin was standing by his piece, a painting titled Duality, depicting two intertwined oak trees emerging from a single root. Carla, with her sleek, black bob and a red dress that seemed to capture all the energy in the room, stopped in front of it. It's powerful, she said, her voice clear and sure. You feel the connection, but also the tension. As if one tree wanted to go towards the sun and the other towards the shade, but the root won't let them. Benjamin was speechless. No one had ever read his work with such precision. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to express. Carla extended her hand. I'm Carla Vega. I study marketing. Benjamin Mendoza, he said, shaking her hand, feeling an electric spark. Carla was a hurricane of ambition and charisma. She knew what she wanted and how to get it. To Benjamin, whose existence had been defined by his family's warmth and the silent reflection of his art, she was fascinating. The courtship was swift. She took him to trendy restaurants, introduced him to important people, talked about building a bright future together. She told him his art was adorable and that with the right connections, he could really make something of it. Alejandro met Carla during a visit. The impression was instant and not entirely positive. While Benjamin helped in the kitchen, Alejandro and Carla sat on the sofa of Benjamin's small apartment. "Benjamin talks about you a lot," said Carla, taking a sip of wine. "The famous fighter. Must be handy to have a brother who can intimidate people." Alejandro looked at her, assessing. "I don't intimidate people. I train. And Benjamin has never needed intimidating. He's stronger than he looks." Carla smiled, an expression that didn't reach her steel gray eyes. "We're all strong in our own way," she replied, and changed the subject. That night, after Carla left, Alejandro confronted Benjamin. "I don't like her," he said bluntly, as always. "She's controlling. She talks to you like you're a project." Benjamin shrugged. "She's just self-assured, Alex. She inspires me. Pushes me to be better." "Better than what?" "You're already amazing." But Benjamin was in love. They married a year after graduation, an elegant wedding at a country estate. Alejandro was the best man, his smile tense as he watched his brother swear eternal love to a woman whose gaze, the moment Benjamin slid on the ring, seemed to Alejandro more triumphant than loving. Adult life settled in. Alejandro opened his own gym, El Dojo Mendoza, building it into a local. Success through hard work and a genuine passion for teaching. His apartment was functional, simple furniture, a punching bag in the corner, photos of his family and Benjamin on the wall. His dates were sporadic. Women often found his intensity and his primary loyalty to his brother a bit overwhelming. He didn't mind. His life had purpose. Benjamin and Carla bought a modern house in a suburban development. It was the picture of perfection, minimalist design, all shades of gray and white, not a single smudge or a painting on the walls that hadn't been curated by Carla. Benjamin worked from a home studio, doing commercial illustration jobs, while still painting his more personal works at Nightworks, Carla rarely commented on. Their talks about opening a gallery slowly died, replaced by discussions about investments, the right car, and Instagrammable vacations. The first incident happened about 2 years into the marriage. Benjamin came to the dojo with a faint bruise on his temple, barely covered by concealer. "I walked into the closet door," he said quickly, before Alejandro could ask. Alejandro hesitated, his protector's instinct on alert, but accepted the explanation. Then came the slow isolation. Carla criticized. "Benjamin's friends, Lucua is so dramatic that Marcos has no ambition." Gradually, the calls became less frequent, the visits shorter, always with Carla present, steering the conversation. Benjamin started wearing clothes she picked out, getting his haircut as she preferred. The light in his eyes, the one Alejandro associated with his brother's pure creativity, began to dim. The crisis came in the form of an opportunity. A small storefront in the city's historic center was available for rent, perfect for a gallery. Benjamin, excited, made plans, sketches, a budget. He presented it to Carla over dinner. "It's our moment," he said, his eyes shining with the old enthusiasm. "I can use the ground floor for exhibits and the upstairs as a studio." I could teach classes on weekends. Carla set down her fork, the sound echoing on the marble table. A gallery? Benjamin, that's not a plan. It's an expensive hobby. Have you seen the numbers? You'll most likely lose money for years. We already have a mortgage. We need to think about our retirement, our future. But it's my dream, Benjamin whispered, his voice small. Dreams don't pay the bills, Carla retorted, her tone sharp. Your illustration work is stable. Focus on that. And that location is in a horrible area. The argument escalated. For the first time, Benjamin stood his ground, his passion for art overriding his desire to please. Carla, frustrated by his rare resistance, exploded. You're always living in the clouds. Do you think the world needs your pretty pictures? You're so naive. And then it happened. In a swift motion, she threw her wine glass against the wall, where it shattered, leaving a crimson stain that looked like blood. A shard bounced and grazed Benjamin's cheek, leaving a thin cut. They both froze, staring at the spreading stain. Carla took a deep breath, her anger instantly transforming into icy calm. Look what you made me do, she said, her voice now frigid. Clean that up, and go tend to that cut. You look like a vagrant. Benjamin, trembling, obeyed. That night, looking at himself in the bathroom mirror as he pressed a cloth to the cut, shame flooded him. A man doesn't cry over a broken glass. A man doesn't feel afraid of his wife. He promised himself he would be stronger, that he wouldn't provoke her. He didn't tell Alejandro. Instead, he canceled his gallery plans the next day, saying maybe Carla was right. That pattern established itself. Criticism, then explosive anger, a shove, a thrown object, a slap, followed by a period of cold indifference or, sometimes, calculated tenderness from Carla, only to start again. Benjamin became entangled in the web, convincing himself it was his fault, that if he could just be a better husband, more understanding, more successful, she would be the woman he met at the art show again. Alejandro only saw the consequences. Benjamin's dampened creativity, his withdrawal, the constant excuses. The occasional bruises explained as silly falls or accidents at the gym during a rare visit. Once, in the middle of summer, Benjamin wore a long-sleeved shirt. When Alejandro joked about it, Benjamin got nervous and said he had a rash. Brother, if there's something. Alejandro started one night after Carla left to dinner early, citing work. There's nothing, Alex, Benjamin interrupted, his smile strained. I'm fine. Just a bit of stress. She works a lot. Alejandro didn't believe him. But how to prove it? How to accuse Carla, the successful marketing executive, the perfect hostess, of doing something to his gentle brother? Without proof, it was just an overprotective brother's suspicion. So he watched, his helplessness feeding a silent rage, waiting for the moment Benjamin would finally ask for help. That moment came with the sound of the doorbell on a November night, as rain lashed against his apartment. Windows and the foreboding settled like a stone in Alejandro's stomach. The doorbell's chime was insistent, slicing through the rhythmic drumming of the rain. Alejandro, who had been reviewing fight tapes on his laptop, paused. It was past 9, an unusual time for visitors. The foreboding that had been a dull ache all evening sharpened into a blade. He opened the door to a vision that would be seared into his memory. Benjamin stood on the threshold, drenched, rainwater dripping from his dark curls onto a face that was a grotesque map of violence. A deep split bisected his lower lip. His right eye was a swollen purple-black slit. Angry bruises, some shaped like grasping fingers, bloomed across his left cheek and down the side of his neck. He was hunched over, one arm cradling his ribs, his whole body trembling not just from the cold. Benjamin? The name was a choked whisper. Alejandro's world tilted, a primal roar building in his ears. He reached out, his hands gentle but urgent, and pulled his brother inside. What the hell happened? Benjamin didn't speak. He allowed himself to be led, collapsing onto Alejandro's worn leather sofa with a pained gasp. The contrast between the violent marks on his face and the familiar, soft features of his twin was jarring, surreal. Carla, Benjamin finally managed the word broken. His voice was ragged, thick with tears and shame. It's gotten worse. Tonight, at her work party, I said the wrong thing. To her boss. I embarrassed her. A sob racked his body, and he flinched, hand flying to his ribs. She was so angry on the drive home, screaming, said I was useless, a millstone. At home, she just lost it. She hit me with the heavy base of the bedside lamp. I heard a crack, I think she broke a rib. Alejandro's blood, which had run cold, now boiled. He saw red at the edges of his vision. The suspicions, the excuses, the worry had all crystallized into a cold, hard fury. He knelt in front of his brother, his fighter's hands hovering, wanting to fix, to heal, but not knowing where to touch. We're going to the hospital. Now, then we're calling the police. Benjamin shook his head violently, wincing at the movement. Fresh tears cut tracks through the grime and rainwater on his cheeks. No, Alex, you don't understand. She'd deny it. She'd say I came at her, that she was defending herself. She's got everyone fooled, her family, her friends, even some of our friends. The perfect Carla Vega, stressed because her dreamer husband can't get his act together. Who are they going to believe? Look at me. He gestured weakly at his own battered body. They'll see a man who got into a fight. They won't see this for what it is. The despair in Benjamin's voice was a physical weight in the room. Alejandro stood up, pacing the small living area like a caged animal. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. The rational part of his brain knew Benjamin was right about the bias, the shameful stigma. Reporting it was the right legal thing to do, but the system could re-victimize him. Benjamin was terrified of not being believed, of public humiliation, of Carla's retaliation, of losing the home and the life he'd built, however poisoned it was. We can't let her get away with this, Alejandro growled, his voice low and dangerous. She could kill you next time. What choice do I have? Benjamin whispered, closing his one good eye. Run, hide? She find me. She make me pay. Alejandro stopped pacing. He stared at his twin, his mirror image broken on the sofa. And then, like a ghost from their childhood, the idea rose not from reason, but from a deep, protective, and furious love. It was reckless, borderline insane, and born directly from a lifetime of perfecting the switch. We have another choice, Alejandro said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He sat on the coffee table, facing Benjamin. We're identical. No one can tell us apart unless they know us inside and out. Carla knows the surface Benjamin, the one she's molded. She doesn't know his core. She doesn't know me. Benjamin opened his eye, confusion cutting through the pain. What are you saying? We switch. You stay here. You rest, You heal. I go back to your house. As you. Benjamin stared, horrified. You're joking. That's impossible. And insane, is it? Alejandro pressed, a fierce light in his eyes. We've done it 100 times. We can do it again. I go in, I confront her on her own turf. I push back just enough. I make her show who she really is in a way that can't be denied. We get proof, Ben. Real, irrefutable proof. It's too dangerous, Benjamin breathed, but a flicker of desperate hope ignited in his gaze. She's violent, Alex. What if she hurts you? A cold, humorless smile touched Alejandro's lips. Let her try. I'm not the brother she's been beating down for years. I'm a professional fighter. I can defend myself without laying a finger on her. And I'll be ready. We'll be recording everything. The plan, born of vengeance and fraternal love, took shape in the stormy night. It was a tightrope walk over an abyss, but for Benjamin, who saw no other path to freedom, it became a lifeline. For Alejandro, it was a mission. The next 48 hours were a crash course in immersion and metamorphosis. Benjamin, under Alejandro's firm care, saw a discreet doctor Alejandro knew from the fight circuit, a man who asked no questions and provided painkillers and a tight wrap for his ribs. The diagnosis: a cracked, not fully broken rib. Severe contusions. Benjamin slept fitfully on Alejandro's sofa, trapped between pain and the surreal nature of their plot. While Benjamin rested, Alejandro became a student. His subject, his own brother, it began with the physical. Alejandro studied Benjamin's posture, the slight, permanent slouch from an old canvas hunching habit, the way he held his left arm a little closer to his body when tired. He practiced walking with less spring, with a softer footfall. He spent hours in front of the mirror, softening his own habitually firm jawline, relaxing the alert intensity in his eyes into Benjamin's more dreamy, sometimes distant gaze. The verbal coaching was exhaustive. Benjamin, propped up with pillows, his voice still weak, drilled him. Her favorite wine is the Albarico from that little vineyard in Rias Baixas. She drinks it chilled, never room temperature. She likes the pillows arranged a specific way on the bed. 3 stacked with the open ends facing the window. On Tuesdays, she has late conference calls with Singapore. Don't disturb her after 8 p.m. She calls her mother every Thursday at 7. If the phone rings then, it's her. Let it go to voicemail. I always do. Her pet name for me is Benji. She uses it when she's being condescending or wants something. Alejandro took notes. His fighter's discipline applied to this strange new task. He memorized the passwords to Benjamin's phone and laptop. He scrolled through months of text threads with Carla, absorbing the patterns, her curt demands, Benjamin's conciliatory replies, the way arguments were never resolved, just buried. The most difficult part was the emotional mimicry. Alejandro had to suppress his own instinct to confront, to dominate. He had to channel Benjamin's conflict avoidance, his tendency to internalize, his quiet artistic sensibility. You have to be me, Benjamin said during one session, frustration edging his voice. But you also have to be not me enough to provoke her. It's a razor's edge, Alex. If you're too passive, she'll just continue as normal. If you're too much like you, she know instantly something's wrong. I'll find the balance, Alejandro assured him, though the magnitude of the deception settled heavily on him. The goal is to create a scenario where her control is challenged. Where the mask slips, they devised a technological safety net. Alejandro would carry two phones, Benjamin's and his own, set to record audio continuously from his pocket. Benjamin also revealed that, in a moment of desperation a year prior, he had bought a tiny wireless camera disguised as a smoke detector. He'd been too afraid to install it. Now, Alejandro would plant it in the living room, the heart of their domestic space. "It feels like a betrayal," Benjamin confessed softly, looking at the tiny device. "Going to such lengths. It's not a betrayal," Alejandro said firmly. "It's survival. It's justice." On the morning Alejandro was to leave, the brothers stood facing each other in the apartment. They were dressed identically in Benjamin's clothes, soft gray cotton trousers and a simple navy sweater. With the bruises hidden under skillfully applied makeup, another skill from the fight world, they were perfect mirror images. Alejandro looked at his brother's battered face, now a reflection of what his own undamaged face would look like in that state. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one last time. Benjamin took a deep, pained breath and nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything. I can't go back there as myself, but you can go back and fight the battle I never could." He reached out, gripping Alejandro's arm. "Be careful, please." "I will. You rest. Keep your phone on. The moment I have what we need, I'll signal you." They embraced carefully, mindful of Benjamin's ribs. In that hug, decades of shared history, secrets, and unconditional love passed between them. Then, Alejandro Mendoza picked up Benjamin's keys, slung his brother's worn leather messenger bag over his shoulder, and walked out the door to become someone else. The house in the suburbs was exactly as Benjamin had described: sleek, cold, and impeccably ordered. Alejandro now, Benjamin, stood on the porch, the key feeling alien in his hand. He took a final centering breath, softening his posture, letting the weight of Benjamin's imagined burden settle on his shoulders. Then he unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled of lemony disinfectant and ambition. "Carla?" "I'm home," he called, making his voice lighter, less resonant than his own. Carla appeared from the hallway that led to the home office. She was dressed in tailored athleisure wear, her black bob perfect, her expression one of mild annoyance rather than concern or remorse. Her eyes, those sharp gray discs, swept over him. "You look better," she stated, not a question. She walked past him towards the kitchen without offering a touch. "Dinner won't be for another hour. I had a salad at my desk. No apology." "No, how are you feeling?" "Just a casual erasure of the previous night's horror." Alejandro felt a spike of anger but forced it down, channeling Benjamin's resignation. "Okay," he murmured, mimicking Benjamin's habit of hanging his bag neatly on a specific hook. "I might just lie down for a bit. My side is still tender." Carla glanced at him from the kitchen island, where she was pouring herself a glass of mineral water. "Don't be so dramatic next time. You know how stress affects me." Making a scene in front of Richard was unforgivable. She's blaming him for her violence, Alejandro thought, the realization like ice in his veins. Classic abuser playbook. He simply nodded, the picture of contrition, and headed upstairs to the bedroom he was to share with this stranger. The room was a showroom. No personal photos, no stray books, just expensive linens and sterile art. In the ensuite bathroom, Alejandro found the evidence of Benjamin's attempted cleanup. A faint pink tinge in the grout of the shower, a missing ceramic soap dish. He carefully installed the tiny camera in a high corner of the living room on his way. Back downstairs, its lens having a clear view of the main seating area. The first test came that evening. Over a silent dinner of grilled chicken and steamed vegetables prepared by Alejandro. Following Carla's terse instructions, she brought up finances. The quarterly investment statement came. Returns are down. We need to reassess your discretionary spending, she said, not looking up from her tablet. Benjamin had coached him. Always agree. Say you'll look at it. But Alejandro, playing the edge, took a small bite and said, My spending is mostly on art supplies, Carla. It's not discretionary. It's for my work. Carla's head snapped up. It was a minute shift, but Alejandro saw it. The flicker of surprise, followed by irritation. Benjamin didn't usually offer pushback on this topic. Semantics. It's an expense that doesn't generate reliable income. We'll discuss it this weekend. Her tone brooked no argument, but the challenge had been registered. The following day, Alejandro deliberately forgot to run the dishwasher on the specific eco-cycle she mandated. When she discovered it, her lips thinned. How many times, Benji? The settings matter. It's not just about cleaning, it's about efficiency. The dishes are clean, Alejandro said, keeping his tone neutral but not apologetic. Does the specific setting matter that much? He saw her fingers tighten around the edge of the counter. A verbal barb was poised on her tongue, but she swallowed it, shooting him a look of pure contempt before walking away. The tension in the house thickened, becoming a palpable thing. Alejandro used Benjamin's laptop to work on illustrations, but he also spent time browsing gallery websites and local real estate for studios, leaving the tabs open. He knew Carla monitored his browsing history. Let her see the dormant dream stirring. On the third night, the dam showed its first real crack. They were in the living room, Carla scrolling through her phone, Alejandro sketching idly on his tablet. A news segment came on about a local artist winning a prestigious grant. See? Carla said, not looking up. That's a real artist. Someone with a clear brand and commercial appeal. Not just dabbling. It was a direct jab, one Benjamin would have absorbed in silence. Alejandro put his tablet down slowly. Dabbling? He repeated, his voice quiet but steady. Is that what you think I do? Dabble? Carla finally looked at him, her eyes narrow. I think you have a comfortable hobby that I subsidize. There's a difference. I have a degree in fine arts. I've sold pieces. To friends. For petty prices. Her smile was cruel. Face it, Benji, you're a lovely decorator. Not a visionary. Alejandro felt the real Benjamin's pain in those words. He stood up, not with his own athletic grace, but with a weary slowness. You know, Carla, sometimes your honesty just feels like cruelty. He turned to leave the room. He didn't see the throw pillow coming. It was soft, harmless, but it hit him squarely in the back. The intent was clear, to humiliate, to reassert dominance. Don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you? She snapped, her voice rising. Alejandro stopped. He didn't turn around. He just stood there, his back to her, letting the act of defiance hang in the air. He heard her sharp intake of breath, the rustle as she stood. But she didn't advance. The moment passed, but the line had been crossed. The controlled Carla had used physical force, however minor. The recording in his pocket had captured it all. The belittling words, the thrown object, the threat in her voice. He knew then that the final, violent unraveling was only a matter of time. He just had to be ready when it came. The days settled into a grim routine. Alejandro maintained his Benjamin persona with meticulous care, but the subtle resistance continued. He started cooking meals that Benjamin loved, but Carla found unrefined, hearty lentil stews, paella with sauerkraut. He left his sketchbook open on the coffee table, filled not with commercial storyboards but with bold, emotional charcoal studies of twisted roots and fractured light, a stark contrast to the sterile decor. Carla's control, once an unchallenged law, was being gently, persistently undermined. Her reactions grew colder, her verbal jabs sharper. She began to audit his time, questioning how long he spent on non-revenue generating activities. Alejandro, channeling a quiet version of his own defiance, would simply reply, "I'm working on my portfolio." The real test came on Friday night. Carla had invited her boss, Richard, and his wife over for dinner, a calculated move to repair the damage Benjamin had supposedly caused at the work party. Alejandro knew this was a high-wire act. He had to be the perfect, subdued Benjamin in public while still maintaining the slight shift Carla had been sensing. He prepared the meal exactly to her specifications: seared scallops, an asparagus risotto, a delicate lemon tart. He dressed in the clothes she'd laid out, a crisp, pale blue shirt that made him feel like a doll. The guests arrived. Richard was a large, jovial man with a crushing handshake. His wife, Elena, was quiet with observant eyes. Carla was in her element, charming, witty, steering conversation towards Richard's recent golf trip and market trends. "And what about you, Benjamin?" Richard boomed halfway through the main course. "Carla says you're the creative force. Any exciting projects?" Carla smiled tightly, a warning in her eyes. Alejandro wiped his mouth, adopting Benjamin's modest demeanor. "I've been exploring some new themes in my personal work. Less commercial, more introspective." Richard chuckled. "That's what we need more of in this world of noise, eh? Though I suppose it doesn't pay the mortgage." The table laughed politely. Carla's smile didn't waver, but her knuckles were white on her wine glass. "Actually," Alejandro continued, his voice soft but clear, "I've been looking at spaces in the historic district, considering the possibility of a small gallery, a place for introspection to meet the community." The silence was sudden and profound. Richard looked intrigued. Elena's eyebrows raised. Carla's mask slipped for a full second, revealing a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. It was gone so fast Alejandro might have imagined it, replaced by a tinkling laugh. "Benji dreams so big," she said, patting his hand with condescending affection. "He's been talking about that old dream for years. But between my work and his stable contracts, well, we've realized where our priorities need to be. Right, darling?" The pressure in her grip was painful. Alejandro met her eyes, seeing the threat there. He gave a small, acquiescent nod. "Of course, just dreaming out loud." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of strained civility. The moment the door closed behind the guests, the atmosphere in the house plunged to sub-zero. Carla didn't speak. She methodically cleared the table, her movements sharp and precise. Alejandro stayed in the dining room, waiting. He could feel the storm building. She finally turned, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "What?" she said, her voice lethally quiet. "Was that?" "A conversation," Alejandro replied, standing his ground but keeping Benjamin's slouch. "A conversation?" She hissed, pushing off the counter and taking a step forward. "You embarrassed me. Again. in front of my boss, making us look like we don't have a unified plan, like you're some flighty artist I can't control. There's no us in your plans, Carla, Alejandro said, the words slipping out with more of his own edge than intended. There's your plan. I'm just supposed to fit into it. Her composure shattered. You ungrateful little man. She spat, advancing. Everything you have, Miss House, your comfortable little life, is because of me and my plan. Without me, you'd be a starving painter in a garret. You think that's what I'm afraid of? Alejandro shot back, his heart hammering. He was provoking the beast now, intentionally. Being poor? I'm afraid of living in a gilded cage with a warden who hates me. The slap was explosive. It cracked across his cheek, snapping his head to the side. It wasn't the hard throw of the lamp base, but it was full of venom. The hidden camera in the corner saw it. The phone in his pocket recorded her gasp of fury, the sound of the impact. Alejandro slowly turned his head back, his cheek stinging. He didn't raise a hand. He just looked at her, his eyes now holding none of Benjamin's fear, only a cold, assessing calm that utterly confused her. See, he whispered. This is who you are. His lack of expected reaction the cowering. The apology seemed to short-circuit her. She stared at him, chest heaving, a mix of fury and something else, uncertainty. For the first time, she was looking at her husband and seeing a stranger. She backed away, her breath ragged. Get out of my sight, she seethed, her voice trembling. Alejandro didn't need telling twice. He went upstairs, his mind racing. The evidence was mounting. The verbal abuse, the thrown pillow, now a clear, recorded slap. But he knew it wasn't enough. For the police, for the world, it could still be spun as a marital spat. He needed the unassailable. He needed the monster fully unleashed. Lying in the dark, listening to her pace downstairs, he sent a prearranged cryptic text to his brother, weather getting stormy. Stand by? The reply was immediate. Be safe. I'm here. The weekend passed in a frozen standoff. Carla moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only in necessities. She watched him with new, suspicious eyes. The Benji she knew was gone, replaced by this quiet, unsettlingly resilient man. It unnerved her, and her unnerved was dangerous. The breaking point came on Monday evening over something utterly trivial. The dishwasher, Alejandro had loaded it, again deviating from her precise geometric arrangement. He'd done it deliberately, a final, petty straw to break the camel's back. Carla opened it after her evening run. He was in the living room, pretending to read. The silence from the kitchen was heavy. Then came the sound of plates being yanked from the racks. She appeared in the doorway, her face pale with fury. Is this a joke? Her voice was a low tremor. Are you actively trying to drive me insane? Alejandro looked up, feigning innocence. Is something wrong? Wrong? She strode over, grabbed his book, and flung it across the room. It hit the wall with a thud. Everything is wrong. You are wrong. You come back here acting like a stranger, challenging me, embarrassing me, undoing everything. She was unraveling faster than he'd anticipated. He stood up, keeping the couch between them. I'm just existing, Carla. Maybe that's the problem for you. You can't stand anything you can't completely control. Her control snapped. With a cry of raw anger, she lunged not at him, but past him into the kitchen. He heard the drawer screech open, the utility drawer where the sharp knives were kept. Time slowed. His training took over, hyper-focusing his senses. The shift of her weight, The glint of the stainless steel chef's knife in her hand, the wild, unhinged look in her eyes. This was it. The unassailable moment. She came at him not with a skilled strike, but with a wild downward slash aimed at his shoulder. "I'll make you listen," she screamed. Alejandro's movements were a fluid blur. He sidestepped the lunge, his left hand coming up to catch her wrist in a vice-like grip, arresting the knife's descent inches from his body. With a sharp, precise twist of basic disarming technique, he forced her fingers open. The knife clattered to the wooden floor. She shrieked, more in shock and rage than pain. He used her momentum, spinning her around and pinning her against the kitchen island, her arm held securely behind her back. He applied just enough pressure to immobilize her, not to hurt. She struggled, but against his disciplined strength, she was powerless. "Let me go." "You bastard. I'll have you arrested." She spat, thrashing. "You just tried to stab me, Carla," he said, his mouth close to her ear, his voice now dropping the last pretense of Benjamin's softness. It was Alejandro's voice, low and steady. The phone in his pocket had recorded every word, every scream, the clatter of the knife. The hidden camera had captured the entire horrific sequence. "You think you can control me? Hurt me?" He growled, the question meant for the recording, for the future jury. "That ends tonight." Her struggling ceased. The words, the tone, the impossible strength, it finally penetrated her fury. A cold dread washed over her. "Who?" she whispered, craning her neck to try and see his face. "Benjamin?" He didn't answer. Holding her with one hand, he pulled out his phone with the other, stopped the recording, and with a few quick taps, sent it to Benjamin along with a single word: "Now." Then he called the police. "I'd like to report an attempted assault with a deadly weapon at 23. Cale Del Piner," he said, his voice calm and clear. "My wife just attacked me with a knife. I have her disarmed and restrained. Please send officers." Carla went limp, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a terrifying, calculating silence. The mask was not just off. It was shattered on the floor beside the knife. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman. The scene was stark. A visibly shaken Benjamin, Alejandro, standing by the island, a furious, silent Carla seated at the kitchen table where he'd guided her, the chef's knife isolated on the floor as evidence. Alejandro played his part perfectly, the terrified, shocked husband. He showed them the recording on his phone, his hands trembling convincingly. The audio was damning. Her screams, the threat, the clatter of the knife, his own frightened, defensive statements. He did not show them the video from the hidden camera. That was for later, for the lawyers. Carla found her voice spinning a tale of a husband who had changed, become aggressive and provocative, and claimed she had grabbed the knife in self-defense. During a struggle he started. She pointed to his grip on her wrist, the lack of marks on him. The female officer, Officer Ruiz, listened carefully, her eyes missing little. "Senator Mendoza, may we see your arms, your torso?" Alejandro, prepared for this, hesitated, then slowly rolled up his sleeves, revealing unmarked skin. He lifted his shirt, showing his athletic, uninjured abdomen. Carla's eyes widened in triumphant vindication. "But you see?" she said, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. "He's fine. He's strong. He overpowered me." Officer Ruiz looked from Carla to Benjamin. "Senator, you mentioned having more evidence? Of prior incidents?" This was the cue. Alejandro took a shaky breath. There's a camera in the living room. Ben, I installed it months ago after things started getting bad. I was too ashamed to tell anyone. The feed saves to a cloud. The password is on my phone. He handed over Benjamin's phone, the login already pulled up. As Officer Ruiz accessed the cloud storage, Alejandro's own phone vibrated. A message from Benjamin, with Dad and Lucia on our way. Have everything. Carla, sensing a shift, grew more strident. This is an invasion of privacy. He's spying on me. That proves he's unstable. Officer Ruiz ignored her, scrolling through the saved clips on the small screen. Her face grew stony. She saw the night of the thrown pillow and the verbal abuse. She saw the night of the slap clear as day. She saw Carla's face, contorted with a cruelty that no claim of self-defense could explain. She handed the phone to her partner. He watched, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Senora Vega," Officer Ruiz said, her tone formal and cold. "I am placing you under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon and domestic battery. You have the right to remain silent." Carla's calculated composure broke entirely. "You can't be serious. You're believing him? Look at him. He's not even hurt. I'm the victim here." Her shouts echoed through the sterile house as they handcuffed her and led her out. Alejandro gave his statement, sticking meticulously to the story they'd crafted. He was Benjamin Mendoza, a long-term abuse victim who had finally gathered the courage to collect evidence. He was vague about the change Carla mentioned, attributing it to finally starting therapy and finding a backbone. As the police car tail lights disappeared, a different car pulled into the driveway. Javier Mendoza stepped out, his face grim and heartbroken, followed by Benjamin, still moving stiffly but with a new light in his eyes, and their friend Lucia, who looked ready for war. The real Benjamin walked up to the porch where Alejandro stood. They looked at each other, one bearing the fading yellow ghosts of bruises, the other bearing the invisible weight of the last few days. "It's over," Alejandro said softly. Benjamin's eyes filled with tears, not of pain, but of relief. He pulled his brother into a careful, fierce hug. "Thank you," he choked out. Javier enveloped both of his sons, his strong carpenter's arms holding them tight. "My boys," he murmured, his voice thick. "What has she done to this family?" Lucia, practical as ever, was already inside, looking at the appended kitchen. "Right," she said. "Let's get Benjamin's things. He's not spending another night in this museum of misery." The legal process was grueling, but the evidence was formidable. The cloud-stored video footage was the cornerstone. It provided a timeline of escalating abuse, destroying Carla's self-defense claim and her carefully constructed public image. The audio recording of the knife attack was the final, undeniable nail. Carla's family, initially defensive, fell silent when shown excerpts of the evidence. Her friends from the marketing world evaporated. The perfect facade crumbled into dust. Benjamin, with Alejandro, Lucia, and his parents as unwavering pillars, pressed charges. He gave a victim's impact statement that was quiet, powerful, and shattered the courtroom stereotypes. He spoke not with rage, but with a profound sorrow about the systematic destruction of his spirit, the theft of his dreams, the isolation from his loved ones. He spoke of the shame that kept him silent. Alejandro sat behind him every day, a silent sentinel of support. Carla was convicted of aggravated assault and multiple counts of domestic battery. She received a suspended sentence, 3 years of probation, mandatory attendance in a batterer intervention program, and a 5-year restraining order barring her from any contact with Benjamin. The house, deemed a marital asset acquired under duress, was sold with half the proceeds awarded to Benjamin. It was a measure of justice, but not the end of the story. The real battle for Benjamin was internal. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological ones ran deep. He started therapy with a specialist in trauma and male domestic abuse victims. The first few sessions were him sitting in silence, unable to articulate the vortex of shame, fear, and lost identity. Alejandro, meanwhile, found his purpose shifting. He had used his strength to protect his brother in the most direct way possible. Now he wanted to use it to protect others. He began volunteering with a national organization called Voces Masculinas, Male Voices, which offered support lines and resources for male victims of domestic and partner abuse. He spoke at community centers, his story anonymized, challenging the strong man stereotype that trapped so many in silence. He even started a self-defense workshop at his dojo specifically, tailored for victims of abuse, focusing not on aggression, but on boundary setting, de-escalation, and safe, effective disengagement. One evening, months after the trial, Benjamin was in Alejandro's apartment, now his temporary home. He was painting for the first time in years, not a commercial illustration, but a wild, abstract piece full of dark blues breaking into streaks of gold. "I think," Benjamin said, not looking up from the canvas, "I think I want to call the gallery Races Entrelazadas, Intertwined Roots." Alejandro looked up from his laptop, where he was drafting a funding proposal for Voces Masculinas. A slow smile spread across his face. The painting from the exhibition. Benjamin finally met his gaze. It wasn't about tension, you know. Not really. That's what Carla saw. What I always saw was support. 2 distinct trees holding each other up, sharing the same foundation. He dipped his brush in gold paint. I finally see it again. The historic district was alive with music and chatter. String lights crisscrossed the narrow street, illuminating the warm, stone facade of a beautifully restored building. A crowd mingled outside, sipping wine. A sleek brass sign by the door read, "Galleria Races Entrelazadas Inauguration, Renacimiento per Benjamin Mendoza." Inside, the walls were alive with color and emotion. The Renacimiento Rebirth series was Benjamin's triumph paintings that journeyed from dark, confined spaces into explosive, light-filled landscapes. In the center of the main room hung a large diptych. One panel showed 2 shadowy figures in a sterile gray room. The other showed the same 2 figures as robust oak trees on a sun-drenched hill, their roots deeply entangled, their branches reaching for different parts of the same sky. Benjamin, looking healthier and more grounded than Alejandro had ever seen him, was surrounded by well-wishers, their parents, Isabel dabbing proud tears, Javier shaking hands with sturdy pride, Lucia, now a successful graphic designer, laughing with a group of friends. Even some of Benjamin's old art school professors. Alejandro stood slightly apart, leaning against the archway to the back studio. He wore a simple button-down shirt, a slight departure from his usual gym wear. By his side was Mateo, a warm-eyed history teacher he'd been dating for a year, who held his hand comfortably. He watched his brother, his twin, his other root, being celebrated not just as an artist, but as a survivor. He saw the light in Benjamin's eyes, no longer dimmed, but shining with its own fierce, creative fire. Benjamin caught his eye across the room and excused himself. He walked over, pulling both Alejandro and Mateo into a three-way hug. "Couldn't have done it without you," Benjamin said quietly to Alejandro. "You did all the hard work," Alejandro replied. "The healing, the painting, the courage to do this." Benjamin looked around his gallery, at the people, at his art on the walls. "You know, you didn't just save me that night. By going in there, by facing her, you taught her the lesson she desperately needed." His voice was firm, clear. "That no one gets away with breaking someone they claim to love." Mateo squeezed Alejandro's hand. Alejandro looked at his brother, at the proud, whole man he had fought so hard to protect. The years of worry, the fury, the risky plan, the courtrooms, the quiet nights of support, it all distilled into a profound, unshakable peace. He smiled, the easy, genuine smile that had become more frequent in recent years. He put his arm around Benjamin's shoulders, just as he had on that rooftop long ago. That's what brothers are for. Outside, under the Spanish stars, the roots held firm and the trees, forever intertwined, reached ever upward. The end,